ARIA roles can be confusing, but they don't have to be. Odds are, if you're writing semantic HTML, you're already using ARIA roles properly. In this video, we're going to cover the 6 ARIA role categories, and we're going to mention some roles, but we're not going to go too deep into the roles that fall into the ARIA role categories. We're going to keep it very high level and just browse over the categories to get a better understanding of what ARIA roles are and how we can better use them. The first category we're going to talk about today is the widget category. Now, roles under this category can act as a standalone widget or be part of a group of composite widgets. And a good example of this is actually an element that may have the role of link. So let's take a look at that and see what that will look like live on a page. Okay, so here we're on the foundation.mozilla.org privacy not included page, and we're going to just inspect one of the menu elements. And here we see that this element has the role of link. So this is a good example of an element on a page that could possibly go under the widget role category. We do recommend that you do try to use more semantic HTML if possible, instead of actually hard coding ARIA roles into elements. So a good example for this, if you did, say for example, have a link on your page and you wanted to, for some reason, use a span and add an href on it, that's completely possible, and you can definitely add ARIA, the proper ARIA role on it. You can add proper ARIA attributes. However, it can be a bit more challenging to look through docs and find the appropriate values and attributes to actually use. So again, that's why we're recommending you stick to more semantic HTML, because it's better for user agent and keyboard support. So the next ARIA role category we're going to talk about are composite widgets. Now, these are typically parent containers for other standalone widgets, such as an element with the role combo box. And I know you're probably thinking, what in the world is a combo box? Let's see what that looks like on a live page. So we're still on the privacy not included foundation.mozilla.org site, but we're actually in the footer, and we're going to inspect this select box. And we see that it has a role of combo box. And if you continue pressing this left arrow next to the role name, you'll see that it's a parent container to the combo box list role element, and then also more elements with more options with the role of combo box option. And inside those is another element role, text leaf. So this is a really good example of a composite widget and how it can be a parent container to a group of other elements and other widgets more specifically. Next, we have the document structure ARIA role category. Now, this category, it's exactly as it says. It tends to describe the document structure, and a good example of this one would be an element with the role of heading. And typically, elements with the role of heading are usually your H1s, H2s, H3s, H4s. So if we inspect this heading here, we see that it does definitely have the role of heading. But just to show you what I meant by elements such as heading tags, H1, H2, H3, they tend to have this role. We can see that the DOM node is in fact an H1. And if we inspect it in the inspector, we can see, yes, it is an H1. And of course, because we're using semantic HTML, it does have a lot of great accessibility functionality already built into it. The landmark ARIA role category tends to describe regions that are intended to be navigational landmarks. So these are really sort of important parts of the page that you want to tell the screen reader that this is a really important section. Definitely let the user know about it. If you've seen in your accessibility tree, if you've been using semantic HTML, which I hope you are, you've probably seen the role of region. This is a really good example of a role that falls under the landmark ARIA role category. So I'm going to right click this section to inspect accessibility properties, and I see that this section in itself has the role of region. Now, if we want to check to see how our semantic HTML impacted the role that this element was given, we can go over to our DOM node and we see that it is a section element. So we see that this section is organized using the section tag, and it is a parent container of 2 p tags. So this is a really good way to mark different sections in your code as landmark items to better organize your document flow. Our fourth ARIA role category is the live region category. Now, this one explains a region that may be updated due to some external event, but the user's focus may be elsewhere. So we still want to let the user know about this external event, even though they may not be focused on that portion of our page at that point in time. A good example of this could be, for example, a timer on your page. And we want to make sure it has the role of timer to let the user know that, hey, even though you're not focused on the timer right now, it's still important to keep in mind and still important to be aware of. Here's a good example of how you could use a live region role such as timer to code things such as clocks, stopwatches, and even countdowns. Next, our window ARIA role categories tend to act as windows within our windows or our browser. Roles such as alert dialog are good examples of what falls under the window ARIA role category. So this is another MDN web docs page where we can see a basic alert dialog being coded. And I'm pretty sure you're familiar with something like this that pops up that says your session is about to expire. We want to make sure that this information gets to the user. And even if their focus is elsewhere, we want to make sure that, for example, screen readers pick up this notification and alert the user to this dialog. Last but not least, we have our abstract ARIA role categories. Now, this category is pretty special and unique because you're actually not supposed to use it. It defines the way ARIA role taxonomies, which basically means that it defines the role structures and how we use them. And a good example of this is actually the role categories we previously mentioned, like widgets and landmarks. You wouldn't put a role of widget or a role of landmark on an element because they support the role structures. So they don't necessarily fit into categorizing the element as a role widget or role landmark because they're categories themselves. So if that was all super confusing, don't worry about it. Just do not use any roles under the abstract role categories. Today we've learned about the 6 ARIA role categories: widget, composite widget roles, document structure, live region, landmark, window, and abstract. To quickly browse some roles in the categories that we've mentioned today, check out this page on MDN Web Docs that goes over all of the different roles and states and properties under each of the categories. And if you want more detailed information on the ARIA role categories, definitely visit w3.org. They offer pretty good details and descriptions of each category in addition to an abundance of information on the roles that are within each category. As always, we highly recommend that you stick to using semantic HTML instead of the ARIA attributes, but for any reason, if you do need to use them, they are here and available free to use, and we definitely encourage that you use them after exhausting your semantic HTML possibilities first, of course. So if you have any more questions around ARIA role categories or how to use them, definitely let us know in the comments below.